Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that we are recording and live streaming. You may begin your meeting.
Thank you. Microphone on. I'm very sorry. I see that we do have quorum, so I called this meeting into order, and I will now read the land acknowledgement statement. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have some opening remarks. I would please ask Ms. Wilford to share her screen. Thank you very much. Public meeting under the Planning Act, October 12th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. All Town of Pelham in-person public meetings have been canceled. Instead, the town is holding all meetings electronically via Zoom. Please note that no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. The Planning Department will be providing a presentation regarding the subject applications. Participants are reminded, please ensure that your background is free from offensive or vulgar material. If inappropriate material is visible, you will be removed from the meeting. Vulgar or offensive language will not be tolerated. If inappropriate language is used, you will be removed from the meeting. Participants will remain in the waiting room until they are called to speak. Once your comments have been heard by council, your microphone will be muted and staff will turn off your camera. Decorum. The public meeting under the Planning Act is a formal public hearing requiring decorum. This means that all comments are to be made through the chair. If you have pre-registered to speak, you will be given an opportunity to address council at the public portion of the meeting. If you are live streaming and wish to submit a comment live, please use the clerks@pelham.ca email address. Please note that all comments must be received during the public portion of the meeting, otherwise they will not be considered. Disrespectful comments will also not be tolerated. Please note that if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons asked to leave. Public portion of the meeting. To allow for an efficient meeting, each member of the public will be given an opportunity to speak to council during the public portion of the meeting. Please note, after all members of the public have been given the opportunity to speak, the applicant or agent will have the opportunity to address the public comments and concerns at one time. Please note that all comments stated and received electronically form part of the public record and will be considered by planning staff when preparing their recommendation report to council. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the planner responsible for these applications in writing as soon as possible. Kenny Ng, Planner, 20 Pelham Town Square, P.O. Box 400, Fun Hill, Ontario, LOS 1EO, KNG@pelham.ca. This contact information can also be found on the Town of Pelham's website. That brings us, Mr. Mayor, to the adoption of the agenda. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Olson that the agenda be amended to include item number 4.2.1, being written correspondence. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, after viewing the agenda, is there any discussion from council members on this item? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. I will begin the vote with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
And that motion carries. Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forward by Councillor Kaur that the agenda for the October 12th, 2021 public meeting under the Planning Act, special meeting of Committee of the Whole, be adopted as amended. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, and that motion carries. 3, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. After viewing the items on the agenda this evening, does any councillor have a pecuniary interest and general nature thereof to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, I have so noted. 3, Mr. Mayor, we are now on item number 4, and I will now read the notice requirements into the record. Application for zoning bylaw amendment, Saffron Meadows Phase 1 and 2 subdivision and River Estates Phase 2 subdivision, file number AM01-2021. A housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment to rectify non-compliance with the zoning bylaw for the streets, townhouse block/units in the subdivisions as it relates to lot frontage and exterior side yard setbacks to facilitate subsequent part lot control applications. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendments. This meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. Notice of this meeting was published in the Voice of Pelham on September 22nd, 2021. The notice provided information on the property, including the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. Contact information is available on the town's website and will also be displayed on the last slide of staff presentation to follow shortly. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, OLT, but the person does not make an oral submission at this public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw has passed, the person or body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and therefore, any comments received will be taken into account for Council's consideration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have our planner present, Mr. Kenny Ng. Mr. Ng, please feel free to go ahead and start your presentation.
Mr. Ng, before you begin, I believe this is your first presentation to this council, and on behalf of council, we wish you, glad you could make it to the council chambers, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I will be presenting information on the subject site and also the amendment itself. So the subject lands within the River Estates Phase 2 subdivision are located on south side of Summerside Boulevard, west of Rice Road. The subject lands within the Saffron Meadows Phase 1 and 2 subdivisions are located south of Port Robinson Road, west of Rice Road. The Saffron Meadows Phase 1 and 2 subdivisions were rezoned to a specific vision, residential multiple 1-238 and 20. The River Estate Phase 2 subdivision was rezoned to a site-specific provision, residential multiple 1-287 and 20. Provisions with elevations on the required lots and buildings. All the above noted subdivisions have been registered, building permits have been applied for, and construction has proceeded. To facilitate the creation of freehold individual townhouse units, the individual lot within the townhouse block is created at part lot control stage after the townhouse dwelling units are constructed. This has led to some variation in the interpretation of the bylaw, and this proposed zoning bylaw amendment will serve to resolve these interpretation issues when the individual lot is created through part lot control, and so to avoid any unintentional non-compliant situations. When council considers a zoning bylaw amendment, the decision shall be consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform with any applicable provincial plans, which includes the Greenbelt Plan, Growth Plan, etc. According to the PPS, the subject site is located within a settlement area where growth should be directed. Similar to the PPS, the Growth Plan also designates the site as settlement area. The Greenbelt Plan and the Niagara Escarpment Plan are not applicable. The regional official plan designates the subject lands as designated greenfield area within the urban area boundary, and the local official plan designates the subject lands as secondary plan area within the Fawn settlement area. The East Fawn Hill secondary plan designates the subject lands in the River Estates Phase 2 subdivision as East Fawn Hill medium density residential, and the subject lands in the Saffron Meadows Phase 1 and 2 subdivision as low density residential. So the subject lands in the River Estates Phase 2 subdivision are currently zoned residential multiple 1-287, and on June 30th, 2020, the Committee of Adjustment approved minor variance to permit the reductions to the front and exterior side yards. Although the building locations were approved through the minor variances, a technical issue still exists with respect to the zoning bylaw section 6.27, a daylight triangle. And below are following the slide is the summary of zoning deficiencies for the townhouse blocks within the subdivisions. So as you can see, the daylight triangle is defined as the triangular shape that runs along the street frontage, basically a 9 meters by 9 meters triangular shape. And, basically, no structure greater than 0.5 meters are allowed to encroach onto the area to obviously prevent any siting issues. So the Saffron Meadows Phase 1 subdivision are currently zoned residential multiple 1-268. And some of the zoning deficiencies are the lot frontages, which are lacking. So for the block 44, it is a corner lot frontage, and the rest are just regular frontages. As for Saffron Meadows 2, they're also currently zoned as residential multiple 1-268, and they also have some of the lot frontage zoning issues. So agencies were circulated for review and comment on the application prior to scheduling this public meeting. No concerns were received from any agencies. And also no public comments were received up to date. So any questions or comments can be directed by contact following this meeting. And the next steps are for staff to prepare a recommendation report for council's consideration at a future meeting. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ng. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have no pre-registered members of the public to speak on this application. However, I will just check the clerks@pelham.ca email address to see if we have received any emails during the presentation. Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that it is 5:44 and we have received no emails, and therefore you can close the public portion of the meeting and move to committee input.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker, right?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, we do not have any public speakers for this application, and now the public portion of the meeting has closed, and you can move into committee input.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought we had Ken. Okay, that's fine. Okay, committee input then. Council, any questions or comments on Mr. Ng's presentation? Please, now is the time to voice it. I see Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering if there's a reason why these deficiencies weren't found before building permits and construction was commenced.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ng, would you like to answer that question?
So yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So basically, the townhouse blocks conform to the lot frontage requirement. However, during the review stage, the part lot control application would create freehold townhouse units after the townhouse has been constructed. And it was during that process that was discovered that those deficiencies exist. And therefore, this zoning bylaw amendment will serve to rectify any interpretations issues and also deficiencies.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ng. Councillor?
Yes, thank you for the answer, but it doesn't explain why the deficiencies weren't found before construction started.
Well, perhaps we will go to the Director of Planning, Ms. Weens. Would you care to comment on this, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'll try to shed some light on this. So at building permit stage, it is one block of land, and there could be 3 or 4 townhouse units being constructed in that total block of land. So at building permit stage, the bylaw is met and it conforms with respect to the setbacks, but it's not until you create the dividing line, which happens at part lot control stage after the building is constructed, that there is this non-compliant situation occurring. It's after the permits have been issued, after the buildings are constructed. So it creates an unintentional non-complying situation, and we want to, through this housekeeping amendment, just rectify that. But certainly at the time of building permit application, because there isn't a lot line, the units do conform.
Thank you, Ms. Weens. Councillor?
Yes, thank you for the explanation, but it's in a way, it makes no sense to me. I would think that those boundaries and lot lines would be defined before a building construction started. But if that's the way it is, it is.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you, for street townhouses and semi-detached units, the dividing lot line is not created until after the unit is constructed, and that's through a part lot control bylaw. And so, yeah, it's a bit unusual, I give you that, and it makes this circumstance a bit odd. So we're trying to just correct something here. Nothing changes physically on the ground, but it's just where that lot line is.
Thank you, Ms. Weens. Councillor? Okay. Councillor Edelbrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Ng. I appreciate it. The question I have is, I heard the planning director's reply to Councillor Stewart, but I still don't understand how a sight line can change whether it's all in one unit or a separate unit once you divide lot. lines. So please explain to me how a sight line changes when you draw dividing lines.
Ms. Weens, want to attempt to clarify?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, through you. So the sight line, again, isn't changing. The Committee of Adjustment approved a variance to reduce the exterior side yard setback. And in this case, the sight line is not changing because the boulevards are, there are wide boulevards on this area where the sight line is impacted. So the actual encroachment, it's going to be difficult to explain. The actual encroachment is within a corner of the sight line, but it doesn't impact the view because the street where the actual paved area of the street is further set back because of the wide boulevard. And so in this instance, there's virtually no impact on the sight line.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions pertaining to the presentation? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that committee receive report 2021-0172 for information and recommend to council that planning staff be directed to prepare a recommendation report for consideration of adopting the zoning bylaw amendment. For the vote, I will start with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
And that carries. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrandt that committee receive the written correspondence as listed on the agenda. For the vote, I will start with Councillor Olsen.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
And that carries. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, and I will now read the notice of requirements into the record.
Thank you.
Application for a zoning bylaw amendment, 588 Chandler Road, file AM 06-2021. A zoning bylaw amendment to prohibit further residential construction on farmland and to amend site-specific zoning provisions to facilitate a surplus farm dwelling severance resulting from a farm consolidation. The rezoning application is a condition of severance approved by the Town's Committee of Adjustment under file B21/2021P. The Planning Act requires under Section 34 that Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This public meeting has been called to satisfy this requirement. Notice of this meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all persons who are listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 120 meters of the subject property on September 15th, 2021. The notice provided information on the property, including the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. In addition to providing information, we will also receive any comments which any member of the public may wish to offer. If you wish to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please contact the clerk in writing as soon as possible. This contact information is available on the town's website and will also be displayed on the last slide of the staff presentation to follow shortly. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Town of Pelham to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the Town of Pelham before the bylaw is passed, the person or body is not entitled to appeal the decision. In closing, we stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and therefore any comments received will be taken into account for Council's consideration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would now ask our planner, Mr. Ng, to proceed with his presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Ng, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the subject site 588 Chandler is located between Chandler Road and Weber Road, lying east of Cream Street. The subject site is approximately 38.3 hectares in size, and it currently contains one single detached dwelling, several accessory structures, and productive farmland. So the applicant applied for a consent application earlier this year to sever the existing dwelling as a surplus farm dwelling as a result of farm consolidation. And the committee approved the severance conditionally, and one of the conditions is to acquire agricultural purposes only zoning on the retained farmland, part 2 on the sketch, to ensure the protection of agricultural farmland and to also address any site-specific zoning deficiencies from the severance on the severed lot, which is displayed as part 1 on the consent sketch. So the site-specific zoning on part 1 will amend the maximum lot coverage allowed for accessory building up to 1.58%, and the maximum height allowed for accessory building to 5.9 meters, 19 feet. So the agricultural purposes only zoning on part 2 will exclude any future residential buildings to be built on the retained farmland to ensure the protection of prime agricultural land. So when council considers a zoning bylaw amendment, this decision shall be consistent with the provincial policy statement and conform with any applicable provincial plans. And under the PPS, the subject site is located within a prime agricultural area, and the growth plan identifies the subject site as prime agricultural lands. Because the subject site is located outside of the Greenbelt Plan and the Naira Escarpment Plan, they are therefore not applicable. So the regional official plan designates the subject site as good general agricultural area, and the town designates the site as good general agricultural. So all of the policies recognize that agricultural lands is a valuable asset that must be protected and conserved. Accordingly, lot creation in agricultural areas is very restrictive and would only permit severance for agricultural lots, minor boundary adjustments, and the disposal of a resident surplus to a farming operation as a result of a farm consolidation. For a subject application, planning policies require that residential construction is prohibited on the vacant farmland parcel. So the subject site is currently zoned as agricultural-25 and light industrial-25 according to the zoning bylaw. Both provisions require that maximum height of all buildings and structures be limited to 10.5 meters to prevent siting issues, and this provision will continue to apply. As mentioned earlier, both parcels will be rezoned to site-specific provision. Part 1 with the amended maximum height and lot coverage, and Part 2 will be agricultural purposes only. So agencies were circulated for review and comment on the application. And to date, we have not received any objections to the application from the agencies. On September 15, 2021, a public meeting notice was circulated to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject land's boundaries. In addition, a public notice sign was posted at the street frontage on Chandler Road. And to date, no public comments have been received. So following to tonight's meeting, any questions or comments can be directed to my contact link, and next steps are for staff to prepare a recommendation report council's consideration at a future meeting. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ng, for that report. I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to the applicant's presentation. I do see that we have our applicant, Mrs. Sonneveld, present, and she may wish to make comment.
Okay. Ms. Sonneveld, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Right now, we appreciate the report and the recommendation. We really have nothing else to add at this time.
No. Okay, thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to the public portion of the meeting. We do not have any pre-registered members of the public for this application. Having said that, I will just check the clerks@pelham.ca email address. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that it is 5:59 and we have received no emails, and therefore you may close the public portion of the meeting and move to committee input.
Okay, thank you. And to turn to council for any questions, comments on this application before us. Not seeing any. I'll return to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the presentation of resolutions. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that committee receive report 2021-0170 for information and recommend to council that planning staff be directed to prepare the recommendation report for consideration of adopting the zoning bylaw amendment. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
Thank you, and that vote carries. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Olson that committee receive the applicant's presentation for information. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Councillor Kaur? Councillor Kaur?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And that carries.
Thank you. Yeah,
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we did not receive any written or verbal correspondence for this application, and therefore that does bring us to item 6 on the agenda, being adjournment.
Okay, thank you. Before we do that, I'll just want to wish the Sonnenfelds congratulations on your application and happy farming in the future.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Madam Clerk? Oh, we're done?
Just about. I have a motion put forward by Councillor Hildebrand that the special committee of the whole public meeting under the Planning Act be adjourned. For the vote, I will begin with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Councillor Hahn?
Yes.
And Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes.
Mayor Junkin?
Yes.
And that carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, that does pass, and you may gavel out your meeting.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Right.